Hey guys, tonight we're going on a very slow caravan. You're not crossing a bustling marketplace. You're loping across the spine of the world, the Silk Road, but not for spices or silk. No, you're here for something far more fragile, far more precious, and infinitely more boring to most everyone else. Words. You're a guardian of one of the lost Nomad libraries. Picture yourself not as a warrior, but as a scholar in loose, dusty robes, your most valuable weapon a pot of ink. Your throne isn't a chair, but a rolled-up carpet next to a trunk of manuscripts, and your palace is the shade of a canvas canopy, flapping gently in the dry, endless wind. You're responsible for ensuring that philosophical treatises from Samarkand and star charts from Baghdad don't end up as kindling for a campfire. And let's be honest, you'd probably last about 5 minutes out here. One misplaced scroll, one spilled water skin on a priceless map, and you'd be demoted to permanent camel brush duty. The pressure of keeping track of every single folio in the middle of a sandstorm is a special kind of anxiety you definitely don't need before bed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far away, maybe from a cozy apartment in Seoul or a quiet house in Lisbon, I'd love it if you drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to see where this little sleepy community has spread. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you, of course, isn't the sight of the books, but the smell. It's a peculiar cocktail of old paper, which honestly smells a bit like mushrooms, mixed with the distinct oily scent of tanned leather bindings, and underpinning it all, the warm, pungent, and let's face it, not entirely pleasant aroma of the camels carrying your entire library. It's the smell of knowledge on the move. You're riding in a wooden chest, strapped securely to a custom-made frame on the camel's back. Each jolt and sway is a gentle rocking motion, a lullaby of logistics. The world outside your chest is a symphony of browns and golds, of endless sky and rippling sand, but inside it's dark and safe. You can hear the soft rustle of the papyrus scrolls nestled next to you, each one wrapped in a scrap of faded silk, to protect it from the grit that finds its way into everything. You can feel the weight of the clay tablets, the real ancient hard drives nestled in their straw padding. They don't rustle. They just sit there heavy with permanence. This is the most common way knowledge traveled, not in the head of a scholar, but packed away like the most delicate pottery, bouncing along to the rhythm of a camel's gait. A popular historical fact is that the Silk Road was a network of trade routes, but a less known, wonderfully odd truth is that some of the most dedicated couriers weren't traders, but these librarian monks who would walk for years, their sole purpose being to deliver a single, specific text to a single waiting monastery. They were the human equivalent of a very slow, very dedicated postal service. And as for why they went to such lengths, well, the historians are still debating whether it was purely for religious dissemination, or if there was a more complex, almost diplomatic game of intellectual one-upmanship between rival courts, using books as the ultimate currency. For now, just feel the sway. The sun is warm on the lid of your chest. The caravan moves at a pace that would make a snail look impatient. Every footfall is a step deeper into the story and a step closer to sleep. Section 2. The rhythmic sway of your camel is the only constant now, a metronome counting out the passage of miles, under a sky so vast it feels like it's swallowing you whole. Your back aches, a dull, persistent complaint from a body not built for this kind of travel. But the merchant riding just ahead of you, a man named Anwar whose face is a roadmap of sun wrinkles and dust, seems utterly unbothered. He's not just a merchant. He's a Pan-Nama, a keeper of books. You watch him, this human filing cabinet on camelback, his mind a cross-referenced catalogue of stories, star charts, medical remedies and poetry. He's the opposite of a university scholar locked in a dusty tower. His university is this very path, his lecture hall a circle of stones around a campfire. He's a librarian whose collection is constantly at risk of being lost to a sudden river crossing, a sandstorm or a bandit's arrow, which adds a certain thrilling, low-grade panic to the whole profession that your local librarian probably doesn't have to contend with. He's carrying a fortune in knowledge, and the security system is his wits and the sharp-eyed guards riding alongside. You can hear the soft percussive clink of clay ink pots and the rustle of parchment from within the panniers slung over his camel, a sound more precious out here than the chime of gold coins. A popular historical event to anchor, this is the vast network of Islamic scholarship that flourished along these routes. With cities like Bukhara and Samarkand becoming legendary centers of learning, their knowledge physically carried by such men. But here's a weird little fact. Many of these merchant scholars would chew on the tips of their reed pens. It wasn't a nervous habit. The saliva would soften the reed, allowing for a finer, more precise point for the intricate calligraphy, making them walking, talking pencil sharpeners. As the stars wheel overhead, you realize this entire enterprise, this fragile transfer of wisdom across continents, hinges on the memory and resilience of people like Anwar. Historians still fiercely debate the full scope of what was lost versus what was saved. How many of these walking libraries simply vanished into the dunes, their knowledge dying with them, unrecorded? The weight of that responsibility sits on Anwar's shoulders as visibly as his worn woolen cloak. Section 3A's the sun finally bleeds out over the western dunes. The caravan master calls a halt for the night. There's a flurry of practiced, weary activity, unloading the groaning camels, setting up simple tents, kindling fires against the creeping desert chill. Anwar, your merchant scholar, moves with a particular reverence as he supervises the unloading of his most precious cargo, the library chests. These aren't just rough-hewn crates. They are objects of beauty and engineering, designed to survive a journey that would pulverize lesser things. You run a hand over the one being placed near your sleeping roll. The wood is dark and dense, reinforced with bands of tarnished brass. The lid is sealed with a thick wax blob, impressed with Anwar's personal seal, a stylized scorpion. The whole thing smells of cedarwood, beeswax, and the faint, inescapable scent of old paper. A smell that feels wildly out of place here in the middle of nowhere. It's like a scent portal straight to a quiet study, a stark contrast to the smell of camel and dust. Inside, are layers of compartments, each manuscript or codex nestled in its own felt-lined niche, separated by thin sheets of sandalwood to keep the insects and the dreaded dampness at bay. Thence the ancient analog equivalent of a shockproof, waterproof and dustproof hard drive, only made by a craftsman who'd laugh at the very concept of a microchip. Her popular historical reference point is the famed Library of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. But this is its nomadic, rugged cousin, the library that couldn't afford to stay in one place. A bizarre but true fact. The glue used in the binding of some of these traveling books was often made from fish bones, a recipe that was itself a closely guarded secret passed along these very routes. It had to be flexible enough to not crack in the dry heat, but strong enough to hold through the constant jostling. Historians still debate the exact recipes for these ancient bookbinding adhesives, trying to reverse engineer them from the few surviving samples. As the chest is secured for the night, you realize it's not just a box of stories. It's a fortress, a tiny, mobile civilization built to defend its fragile contents against the relentless indifference of the world. Section 4. The campfire pops and crackles, casting long dancing shadows that seem to act out the stories being told. Anwar has opened one of the smaller chests, not the grand cedar one, but a sturdy leather-bound case that looks like it's been kicked by every camel from here to Chang'an. This is his working library, his circulating collection. You watch as another merchant, a man with a thick accent from the steppes, gestures animatedly, then hands Anwar a tightly rolled scroll. Anwar unrolls it with practiced care, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar script. He nods, and in return he pulls out a small palm leaf booklet from his own case and offers it. No money changes hands. This is the real currency of the Silk Road, the economy of ideas. They are trading a detailed account of a new star constellation observed in the southern sky for a medical treatise on setting broken bones using a specific type of willow splint. This is the knowledge market in action, a silent, constant undercurrent to the more famous trade in silk and spices. It's like a bizarre ancient version of a digital file-sharing network running at the speed of a walking camel. You see maps being traced in the dirt, corrected by others who have traveled different paths. The recipe for a better, longer-burning lamp fuel is whispered from one trader to the next. A popular historical event you might recognize is the way papermaking technology itself spread westward from China, not in a single dramatic event, but through thousands of such small, Practical exchanges in dusty camps just like this. And here's a strange little fact. Sometimes the most valuable books weren't books at all. They were kirigami, intricate folded paper objects that contained hidden compartments holding encoded messages or complex mathematical diagrams that could only be understood when unfolded in a specific sequence, the ancient world's version of an encrypted zip file. Historians still fiercely debate the true volume of this intellectual trade, arguing over whether we have massively underestimated the sheer tonnage of knowledge that was in constant physical motion. As you listen to the low murmur of bartered poetry and astronomy, you understand that this campfire is a node in a global network, a university without walls, and the lecture tonight is on everything under the stars. Section 5. The caravanserai emerges from the twilight not as a building, but as a silhouette against the purple sky, a square fortress of mud brick that promises safety, water, and the company of other dust-caked travelers. As you file through the massive wooden gates with the rest of the caravan, the feeling is less of arriving at a hotel and more of a ship sliding into a crowded, noisy port. The central courtyard is a chaos of braying animals, shouting merchants, and the clatter of unpacking. But then, as the animals are settled and the goods are secured, a shift occurs. Small circles form. Anwar finds his usual spot, under a sheltered archway, and the cedar chest is opened with a ceremony that feels both casual and deeply sacred. This is where the library truly comes to life. The caravanserai transforms from a logistical hub into a living, breathing intellectual salon. A Persian poet begins reciting verses about a lost love, his voice a low melodic hum that competes with the crickets. A Nestorian Christian monk from somewhere far to the west quietly copies a page from one of Anwar's medical texts onto a fresh piece of vellum, his quill scratching a counter-rhythm to the poet's words. You see a Chinese official, looking profoundly out of place in his silks, engaging in a heated but respectful debate with a Greek philosopher turned merchant about the nature of the soul, using a shared halting tongue of Turkic and hand gestures. It's a scene of beautiful, improbable chaos, a UN General Assembly if all the diplomats had just survived a month in the desert together. A popular historical touchstone is the role these caravanserais played in the spread of religions like Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam, serving as neutral grounds for theological debate and conversion. But a wonderfully odd fact is that some of the most prized texts weren't grand philosophical works, but what amounted to ancient travel blogs, accounts of bizarre foods, strange customs, and, most practically, detailed descriptions of which local rulers were corrupt and needed to be bribed, and which were honorable. These were the real gritty TripAdvisor reviews of the 10th century. Historians still debate the accuracy of these often third-hand accounts, trying to separate fact from the tall tales spun to entertain a captive audience on a long night. As you listen to the blend of languages and ideas, the caravanserai ceases to be just a building. It becomes a mind, a temporary collective consciousness formed for a single night before scattering at dawn, each person carrying a new piece of it with them.